And here we are. We are live. Okay, thanks for your patience. I was on Fresh and Fit time or Ryan Stone time. They like to show up late, seems like. That's okay. I'm here. So, got some last minute things crop up. So, I'll get rid of some announcements here right from the beginning. Some of these things were being shared with me before I got started. So, we'll get that out of the way. So first things first. All right. So you guys know, many of you know, unless it's your first time coming here, that I was, still do things with the military, and I was in Afghanistan, 2019, 2020. And then of course, um, about a year later, a little over a year later, we had the huge debacle of our withdrawal from Afghanistan. So, in the process of that withdrawal, without saying too much to get me in any sort of problem, because I still work with the military in some capacity, we left people there, right? So now Ukraine's breaking off, and no one's paying attention to Afghanistan. Well, we left people in that place, people that we made promises to in order to get them out of that country, people who were dedicated and dedicated their lives and put their lives on the line for, well, me and a bunch of guys that I worked with and other US soldiers, troops, and contractors. And they did that with the understanding that they would have a opportunity to leave that country and start a new life in the United States. It wasn't just opportunistic. It's they really needed to leave the country, because if they were going to do work with us, like for example, my interpreter, for example, one of my interpreters, he'd worked with U.S. forces for several years. Even if Afghanistan wasn't owned or turned over to the Taliban and was a safe, relatively safe or stable government, there would still be a ton of people or a lot of people with contrarian views that would want to see these people dead, right? It's kind of like witness protection program. Somebody offers to help the police or federal government, but at some point, they need a new identity and need to get out of where they're at because they'll be killed, right, for that help. Same thing, same sort of thing over in Afghanistan. Well, one of those people happened to be my interpreter. All right, one of my interpreters. I've had several over the years of doing deployments in Iraq and Afghanistan, but this particular guy he would probably blend in and be more American than some of you guys watching this from the United States. I mean, the guy's a pretty cool dude. He, was very smart, knew the language very well, and was very Western in his thinking. There'd be like no concerns about this guy being a bad actor, as a refugee or something like that. And he's not a refugee either. He's somebody who worked to earn his citizenship. And in fact, he has the paperwork saying that he would have the opportunity, ability to finish that process in the United States. However, he was never able to get out, and he had to go into hiding, because if he didn't, he would have been killed. Well, he's still over there, and we had to lay low with that for a while, because once we originally left, trying to pull somebody out of there with Taliban, everybody else on high alert, would have been very expensive. Number one, to pay people off, and number two, not that effective. He might even not make it out. Well, now things are in a situation where he can make it out, and it's really just a matter of setting up the mission and affording his escape and out of that country into a U.S. embassy in one of the neighboring countries. And so, without violating security, are people that are now able to leave Afghanistan, but it does cost some money. They do have to still get away safely and securely. All right. And that's this guy. Now, why am I telling you all this? Well, I'm telling you all this because I put a link in the description of the video. It's a crowdfunding. All right. He's going to need some cash, and we're all donating a bit. We need to reach a goal of $5,000, which isn't that bad. All right. Considering all things, he's going to get other help and other things. I'm doing some things to help that I won't say on the air, but $5,000. And that dude is basically on the process of being home free. So there were some concerns. I talked to one of my contractor friends once everything broke off, like, well, is this really my friend? Or was he killed and did somebody else take over his Facebook page or any of that stuff? And so these were some concerns I had, but I've communicated with him personally, and so has my contractor friend who's has a lot of experience in government. We'll put it like that. Had an opportunity to talk to him also, so it's definitely him. He's alive, which I'm happy to hear about, and now it's time to get him out of there. And so you guys listening, sorry for the long thing or whatever. I mean, no, that's not the topic, but this literally just came up in the last couple days that we were able to do this. We just had the things lined up and everything is kind of lined up, and now he's able to get out where he wasn't before. We're able to do it. We'll need some things, but I'm requesting from you guys a small donation. All right, that's it. And if it's $5, $10, 20, 1,000, whatever, whatever you can do. Okay. Whatever works for you. It's through a crowdfunding. I don't know how taxes work, if you can write it off, but it would be greatly helpful. If we're short, I'll even match what you guys are doing. All right. But I'd like to see you guys after the video or whatever, hit that link and go and just donate a little bit. 5,000 is not a hard goal to meet considering all things. And it's actually not just for him. There's another interpreter as well that's going to be in that mix that will be getting out of there. So you'll be doing a good deed. You'll be getting out some patriots, okay? Some people who watched our back when we were in the field and who are worthy of getting a life of freedom, all right? And they're in a place where they're just not going to survive it if they keep trying to live there and be there. So I would appreciate your guys' help in donation there. Again, that link's in the description of the video. So cool. Next thing is another thing announcement. Had a friend of mine. I've had him on. I've interviewed him before. He is offering really just for you guys and my audience, a crime prevention and response. It's charging everybody else, but if you're watching this video right now and you sign up by tomorrow, okay, registration will be open till tomorrow. How does he have this set up here? Let me read this real quick. This is offer ends. Okay, so you got to shoot him an email over at ian@livesafeacademy.com. That's in the description also. If you do it by before Friday, okay, before tomorrow, he'll send you a promo code, and you guys can get into this crime prevention and response course. It's 2 hours this Sunday, 6:30 to 8:30. You can sign up for the course up until the event, but in order to get the promo code, you got to shoot him an email by Friday. All right, so that's going to be a good offer. So on top of asking you guys for money for my friend who's trying to get out of a really bad situation in Afghanistan, I'm offering you guys at least something for free that my other friend said that he would do for you guys as my audience. And so being able to defend yourself is part of being a man, right? Understanding crime and how to prevent crime and how to use your self-defense skills for those of you who are training that in a situation, okay? Not just in a situation where you're being attacked, right? In real life. We're not talking about the gym or the mat, but then also what to do about that, right? How to prevent that from happening. Considerations with the police, considerations legally, and those sorts of things. And so it's going to be a general class, doesn't matter what part of the world you're in. Okay. But, it'll be useful for you. And like I said, it's no cost to you if you send them that email and get that promo code. Okay, cool. So that all done. Announcements. Let's get into the actual content here. We're going to talk about communication and how men and women communicate differently. All right. So you guys realize there was a pretty popular video Monday's video, where I had Torsha on, or Tori, as I call her by her actual first name. And that is good. Moon-pilled, rational, Ganger. I'm going to share your comment, bro. So, the best example recently of the difference in communication is watching Paul and Torsha talk to each other. Yes. Okay, yes. That's why I like having her on. Okay, first of all, and thank you, sir. I appreciate that. I thought she did a great job, and I think we both did. Yeah, so I appreciate that. So that's a good example. Okay, so the links don't work, son of a bitch. All right, well, I don't know which link doesn't work, man, but I'll have to go look. All right, so I'll have to go look at that later. So check the video because I can't do anything about it now. I'm live, right? So check the video later, and we'll figure out which links don't work. I don't know if it's the crowdfunding for the Afghanistan thing or if it's the free class, but we'll figure it out. Okay. If you contact me on social media, I mean, what a shit, what a nightmare. Because like we had to use a crowdfunding source, couldn't use like your typical ones. What was it? GoFundMe and stuff. They actually don't. Oh, the crime prevention link doesn't work. Hey, Miles. All right. So if the crime prevention link doesn't work, just send an email to ian@livesafeacademy.com. You have to do that anyway for the promo code. So send him that and tell him, your Apex Mindset video told you to get to contact him for a promo code, and then get the links from him. All right. That'll be the solution there. Okay. So yeah, anyways, back to that. So we had, what I like having her on is not just for a perspective, although it's unique and good for us to use, because she's coming up from a female perspective who really embraces some of the, types of concepts that I talk about and that some of my friends talk about from like the red pill community. And so it's unique because a lot of women, not that I wouldn't have them on for other reasons, but they're either not familiar with those concepts, or they're not necessarily in agreement of those concepts. And so she's one who is in agreement, or at least, doing her best to understand even some of them. And she's in that process herself, and she sees things from a perspective of someone who had a chance to work in an industry where she's observing male-female dynamics all the time. Anyway, so I like having her on for that reason. But what I like having her on for also as well is because it allows you guys, we have really good, banter back and forth. Now we do get a bit sidetracked. She's a bit ADHD, and that's okay. And sometimes we wander, and that can be fun for some people to watch and terrible for others. If you're used to my normal content, that might be a horrifying thing for you to watch, but it's still good from a learning perspective. But what I realized is that a lot of you guys really don't understand how women communicate and how it's different than how men communicate. Like, it, but you're more, we'll say, dismissive about female communication. Oh, women are just stupid and illogical and emotional and right? Like, it's more critical. Well, okay, that's a thing you can do, but if you want to actually have healthy, good relationships with women in your life, you probably need to back off the criticism a bit and just try to understand it, because it's a brain wiring thing. It's not an intentional thing. It's not a social conditioning thing per se, although some things might, some social conditioning, of course, will affect her point of view. But the way in which a woman is wired to communicate, her brain is wired to communicate, is fundamentally different from a guy's, because we evolved with different sexual strategies, and that caused us to evolve in a slightly different manner in our communication styles and ways of communicating as a default mechanism anyway, at an evolutionary level. So instinctually, men and women, we have different brain wiring when we communicate, and you can go look at that research if you want. I have so many things in this description that I didn't put every resource for you, but you can do a simple Google search. If you doubt the idea that men and women have different brain structures when they communicate, just do a Google search on it, because it's all there. All right. That's not even up for debate. And so That being said, you got a lot of you guys don't get it. And not only that, do you not understand it, you don't understand frame and how frame works. Some of you think that I'm not sure what your expectation is, but you think that I should, I don't know, cut her off or be more aggressive or dominate the conversation. And then that's the way I'm going to have frame with her in this discussion. And you couldn't be more wrong about that. All right. That tells me you don't know how to communicate with women effectively. And that's why in the picture, the thumbnail, it has a guy blabbing his face off and a girl just sitting there with a smile on her face and a big fat question mark. All right. Because that's usually what I see. That's what I see from guys time and time again in consults. They think, I see it all the time, just observing men and women, where a guy is just blabbing from his perspective and communication style. And then she's essentially not listening, understanding, or if she gets to try to understand and communicate back, she ends up getting frustrated with that communication. Or she tries to take the conversation over or interrupt or any of those things. And then the guy gets frustrated and mad about it and then tries to feel disrespected or something and then tries to dominate the conversation. That's not frame. None of that's frame. All right. And there's even even a comment. There's only one of them. I mean, I think most of you guys understand here, but a lot of you guys that tells me though, there's a lot of you guys don't get it. Like even one of the comments, like, oh, like she had better frame than Apex. Ooh, okay. No, guy, you don't know what frame is. You don't know how to hold it with a woman. That's what that tells me. Now, I have a lot to cover, so I'm not going to go back into the video, but I'll reference it. I'm not going to show the video here. You can go back and watch Monday's videos. I'll give you some time, some areas to go look at because it's an hour and a half long, and maybe you don't want to listen to that for that long. But as I talk here, I'll reference a couple of points because it's you guys need to watch it with an understanding of the points that I'm going to discuss here. So you can help you. It's not to shame you for not knowing this stuff. It's just so you can get help and assistance here on your understanding of frame, your understanding of communication, and how to hold that with a woman. All right. And so let's get into that. Okay. So frame, first of all, what is frame? Well, it's not a concept certainly that I made up, and it's not a concept that came out that was made up in red pill circles either. Now I'm going to reference here Rollo Tomasi. If you just do a search, rational male and frame, you're going to get several articles by him in his blog. Okay. Now those blog articles are great. So they're good reads and I recommend it, but understand he didn't originate the term. This is a term that's been around for a while in cognitive psychology. All right. And yes, rule number one is frame is everything. All right. And I agree with that rule 100%. That was one thing prior to me. I had that understanding prior to picking up the rational male years ago when Rich Cooper over at Entrepreneurs and Cars was talking about it. When he first mentioned it, I had heard about it a little bit, hadn't really read the book. I read book one after that. When I got to the rules, frame is everything. I agree with him there. Okay. And I had that agreement prior to even having, met him. And so, anyway, thanks, Moff. You need to be a mod on my channel. I don't know if you are or not, but anyway, so yeah. Now where did I hear it from? Well, I've been studying psychology for some time here, right? So in cognitive psychology, what frame is, the definition is, it's a set of parameters defining either a particular mental schema or the wider cognitive structure by which an individual perceives or evaluates the world. All right, so that's a definition from cognitive psychology. Now, frame and social dynamics can be understood as this. Frame is the contextual perceptual narrative that you operate from in a social interaction. So the person who has frame or has frame control in that social interaction is the person whose narrative is perceived as more dominant. All right. Now, this is due to the dominant person's strong sense of identity, and strong sense of belief, confidence, and social skills and game, more so than it is the reasoning or logic behind the narrative. All right. And it's even more so, it's that game and that confidence and that belief is even more important than where the narrative originally came from, because so there's a lot of misconceptions about frame here. And it's so you don't have to be the originator of the idea or the narrative or the narrative. You just have to be in control of it, if that makes sense. So in other words, the dominant person can adopt the narrative of a person in power, let's say a manager or a boss, and then end up having frame in those social interactions through the narrative. Okay. So we see this in marriages a lot, where like a wife will adopt the idea from the husband, and the husband got the idea, let's say, from church, like in a traditional marriage, or how he grew up. So she adopts the idea from a husband, but then she takes charge of the narrative and ends up being the one in control of it as the dominant force in the relationship, while the husband lies to himself and thinks he's in charge because the narrative was his idea. All right, that happens a lot, where a woman will let you have an idea and give you the credit that it's your idea, and then you think you're in charge, and actually she's the one controlling that narrative the rest of the time. So you end up being in her frame, right? So frame isn't the narrative itself. It's not about who originated it. It's just about who's having control of it. All right. Now, frame is everything. All right. Think of it as influence or programming. You have been programmed your entire life. Even before you were born, that programming started. It started with your parents. It started with the social environment you were being born into. And your parents had a set of narratives, some of which they may have taken control over, but some of which they had been programmed into. And in that set of narratives, they in turn programmed you, along with your peers, school teachers, society, people you grew up with. Because as you were growing up, you were not emotionally or mentally mature enough to realize that this programming existed. As a baby, your identity is not really separate in your own mind from your caretakers. And then as you grow, it's a process of trying to find your own identity. That's the teenage rebellious years. But even during those teenage rebellious years, programming is going on, whether it's through the rebellion. Oftentimes the idea is that you latch on to that really are someone else's ideas, and being in control by someone else. You're doing it to say, I'm different and I'm better and more evolved than my society I came from. But really, you're just latching on to a different set of programming and somebody else's frame. And you are still operating in that programming right now, probably. All right. Hopefully not. Now, I think about it. When you grab that thing off the shelf to go buy, who made you choose that? Was that your free will? Or is that your programming? Was that idea in your head because something you thought you needed? But why that particular choice? Why that particular brand at that particular time? And so I'm not somebody who am going to sit here and assert that free will doesn't exist. I know some people do that. Some of you Sam Harris fans like to do that. It's not really me. However, I will present the idea, though, that your free will is not as free as you think it is, because programming is involved and frame is involved. And oftentimes that frame is not yours. Now, someone is always doing programming. There is no situation where it's not happening in any social circumstance. So you are either being programmed or you are the programmer. And he who holds the frame is the one who is in control of the programming. Now, most people don't want to recognize that frame or programming even exists. They go along in life making decisions based on programming given to them by somebody else. And they tell themselves, well, I'm making a decision because it's really what I want or it's who I am. But really, they're just in someone else's frame, operating on programming that ultimately may or may not be for their benefit. Okay. When that nice guy walks around and being nice to the girl he likes and doing all of the unattractive things that nice guys do or tend to do, that is him operating off of a social narrative and programming that is not really meant for him to get that girl and to win her attraction over and to have her desire, even though that's what he wants. He thinks it'll get him there. He's been told that, but the programming is not for him. The programming is instead designed for her to see him as an option to use for resources, favors, or even just to boost her self-esteem. It's designed for her to get what she wants. And then if she chooses him to be with him, then cool. But she may just use his nice tendencies and attention and time and effort and not really give anything in return for that and do something different. And he's being programmed to say, oh yeah, that's a good idea. I think I should just keep doing that over and over again because that's going to get somebody to like me eventually. The programming is off and it's designed to enslave him and suit somebody else. When you work for a corporation or work for a boss or work with somebody and they're in charge of the frame, they may or may not be running a programming set of programs that suits you or that's beneficial to you. They are going to be beneficial to themselves first. And it's up to you to decide whether that programming is something you want to be a part of or not. I mean, you're listening to me, and if you're understanding what I said, you're hopefully by choice allowing me to program you, and that's okay. When I talk to my coaches and people that I trust, I'm letting them program me. But the difference is I'm aware of this, and I'm choosing which programming I'm going to go with, and I'm holding my own frame the entire time because I'm controlling the narrative that comes into my awareness. At least that is the struggle and the fight that I'm doing every single day that you should be doing. But most people are complacent because they want to follow, and that makes them feel safe, and that makes them feel like they have a sense of security and like they'll get what they want. But they'll never get what they want completely because really they're following somebody else, and their needs will always come first. Their wants, desires, and purpose will always come first. People want to believe they're in charge of themselves, in charge of their relationships, even when their decisions don't necessarily benefit them. They want to believe that they're in charge without having to challenge the frame or take control of the narrative or become the programmer themselves. That's what people want. It makes them feel safe. But those people will never be in charge of their own lives. So to be that alpha dominant leader, or whatever term you want to call it as a man, and to get what you want as a man, you have to choose to challenge the narrative and take back your frame. Okay? You can do things benevolently to help others and to help others achieve what they want. But you want to do those without sacrificing yourself in who you are. And who are you anyway? Without frame, you don't even know. So instead of acting on someone else's narratives that's designed to serve them, take back your frame and decide to serve in the way that you think is important and good. Now, with that, let's talk about frame in the context of male-female communication, sexual dynamics. All right. So, first of all, frame in every circumstance can't be done through force alone. anyway. All right. So that's important to understand. Even though it might seem like force and coercion would be the way to, it can be a way to hold frame, it's probably the weakest way. And let me tell you why. Being a person who holds frame may have the dynamics or the ability to use force, which can be important in holding that frame, having that ability. However, actually using force doesn't really work. Force or intimidation can get people to comply and do what you want for fear of consequences, right? But if they aren't emotionally bought into your narrative outside of fear or, not wanting negative consequence from you, then they won't enthusiastically comply unless it's during moments of, that fear of losing something, right? They will look to break free from your leadership and from your narrative and remove themselves or remove you as soon as that opportunity arises. So when someone follows your lead because they feel forced to do so, that means that they're not actually accepting and operating in your narrative. They're really just complying to your wishes, which is not the same as frame, because that's in the moment. You want them to comply and want to comply even when you're not watching them, even when there isn't a potential negative consequence. That's frame. Okay. And so they may comply to your wishes at the time, but they're going to be looking for opportunities to break that narrative when they feel that they're forced. If they were bought into your frame, then they wouldn't feel like they're being forced to do something. Now, you need to apply that to your relationships with women. Okay. Some of you guys think that, well, if I lay down some draconian rules that she doesn't really agree with, but I explain it to her real good and she nods her head and says, okay, then that must mean I have frame. All right. And the famous last words of so many guys who call me for advice at consults or who end up even in my courses or my programs is, oh, but I had the frame. I have frame. That's their thing. It's like a self-esteem thing. They got to tell themselves, I have frame. I have frame. Hey, I have frame. She nodded her head and smiled at me with a blank stare as I explained to her for 20 minutes, some boundary or something I have. So I had it, but then you know what? She ran off and did her own thing, man. I don't know what happened. I lost it, I think, or maybe I still have it. Okay. You didn't have frame in the first place. You thought you did because you thought, well, if I just explain it to her real good, and then she doesn't, she seems like she's complacent enough, then maybe I have it. And you don't. All right. You don't have jack shit. All right. And that's your own self-esteem problem that you're unwilling to face the fact that you have no idea what you're doing. All right. And again, as evidence in some of commentary from my Monday show, some of you guys don't have any idea. And I don't say that to be a dick. I don't say that to, try to amog you or harm you or try to say anyone's better than you. I mean, shit, there's different times in my life I didn't know what I was doing either. So it's not a big deal. I'm saying it to help you. And that's why you're listening to me. Otherwise, you can go watch, chicks shake their butt on some shorts on TikTok or something. You don't need my video. So understanding that, though, frame does not mean force. Frame means operating within the narrative and wanting to and choosing to operate in that narrative. Let's get into that. So choosing operating in the narrative also doesn't mean a logical agreement or even an understanding either. Or I'll say that again. So frame doesn't mean your chick has a logical agreement or understanding necessarily. It's nice if she does, but it doesn't mean that necessarily. All right. So we'll give an example. Your girlfriend could think, I don't agree with this narrative and I think it's stupid. Okay. But she could be in your frame still at the same time. Now, this happens through compliance without being forced. All right. So in other words, she hates your narrative and she thinks it's stupid, but she complies with it because she believes in you. And she believes that by doing so, it's the best deal she can get to get her needs met. All right. So I'll use a practical example. Let's say you express to her that keeping ex-boyfriend pictures and memories on display in her social media is inappropriate, being that she's in a new relationship with you. All right. Let's say you express that in so many words. Now she says that she thinks that's stupid and that shouldn't matter. She doesn't care. All right. That's her opinion, right? But the end result is that she complies and removes the photos, not because you threatened her, intimidated her, got real angry or whatever, but just because she knows that that's not something you want, and your investment in her isn't going to quite be there if she's not willing to be in compliance with that. So she decides to go with that. She doesn't believe that that's going to somehow ruin her chances of having a good relationship or a good life. So she demonstrates, and that's how you can demonstrate really whether you really have frame with your chick or not, is when she complies, even when she doesn't agree. And you didn't force her into that compliance. You didn't threaten her with breakups or threaten her with things. All right. I have imposters in the chat, by the way. I just saw an Apex imposter. Yep. So, hey, imposter guy who has all these accounts, at least like the video with your different accounts so then I get a bunch of them. I would appreciate that. You seem to have a lot of fun here doing the thing, but just everybody else recognize that it's probably not me talking because I'm talking, not typing, right? Okay, cool. So not going to interrupt my thought too much to deal with that imposter guy. All right. I just hope that he's benevolent enough to hit like on my video several times through all his 100 accounts. I should have 100 likes just from you, my guy. All right. So anyways, she complies, and that's how you can tell, really, do you have frame with your chick or not? If she agrees with it and had the idea in the first place, that's not really hard frame test now, is it? It's when she doesn't agree, but then she does it anyways without you having to make threats because it's something that you want. And she respects you, admires you, has desire for you, and knows that following your leadership will get her the best outcomes, even when she doesn't agree. That's how you know for sure. And so many of you guys spend and waste your time trying to convince a woman of something instead of just holding the frame and communicating with her properly. And we'll get into what that looks like here in a little bit. All right, I'm trying to stay on the task here, right? So let's look at compliance for a second. So she's complying, even though she doesn't necessarily logically agree with you, but she knows it's the best deal. You didn't have to threaten her. She's like, okay, I'll adopt it anyway because I love you, but I fucking think you're stupid and I hate it. So fine, good, right? That's frame. Now, here's what happens though, all right? A lot of times, not every time, but most of the time, once she's in compliance in adopting your frame or the narrative, and the narrative in this case is this: we don't keep a bunch of photos of our exes to pop up in our timeline and whatnot when we're in a new relationship with somebody else. That's disrespectful to the relationship. That's the narrative. And so even though she doesn't like the narrative, agree with it, she complies to it because she likes you and wants your leadership. Now, from there, she begins to understand, because remember, when people make a decision, all right, when people make a decision, they oftentimes have to justify why they're making that decision later. And that's where you'll start to reach understanding. So in complying with the narrative and taking that action over time, and sometimes a very short amount of time, then instead of saying, I don't agree and I think it's stupid, it's, well, I don't really care about it or think it's a big deal, but he thinks it's a big deal and I understand why he thinks that way. So that's why we're not doing that. We're not keeping photos of our exes. So see, now, instead of going from, you're dumb and I don't agree, because of how you communicate with her, you get compliance. And I'll talk about communication further down when we're done with these points. And then she is now at least an understanding. So it goes from compliance to understanding. Okay, well, I understand where he's coming from, basically. She doesn't agree yet, but she understands. All right. Then over time, that understanding moves oftentimes, more often than not, into agreement because she's doing the behavior. She has to justify the behavior. She sees now from your perspective why it's there. And now she comes up with at least her own way of understanding and her own way of agreeing with it. And it may not be the same way in which you agree with it because, she is her own person. Okay. But she is in the narrative. That's how you have frames. So now she goes from understanding to, instead of, well, I don't really care about it and I don't think it's that important or agree with it, but he thinks it's important. So it turns into, I don't think that people should keep pictures of their exes in their social media timelines and stuff. I just think why would I want to do that? Because it gives the message out to the world or even possibly to an ex that I'm still harbor feelings and emotions towards that relationship, which then makes my boyfriend look bad. And I don't want to make him look bad or make him question the relationship. Even if he says he doesn't, I don't think that's good. I think it's better if you just remove those photos. Bingo. Now she's in agreement with the narrative, as well as understanding why it's there in your perspective, as well as, and she started with a disagreement, but compliance and being in your frame. You see what I'm saying? That's how it works. So a lot of you guys are sitting here arguing with women and they just stop talking or they go, yeah, cool, because they want social acceptance and they don't want to deal with your headache and they're not in your frame and they don't agree. They may comply for a little bit, but they're looking for opportunities to not comply, which is where then they'll test that boundary until there is no more boundary. And then you find yourself in a place where she ends up controlling it because she flips it around and she's not in compliance and you're letting it go. And then now the new boundary is whatever she said. So maybe in that circumstance, it's, well, I just don't have time to go through all my photos like that. Well, if you see something, let me know. And then she just, forgets and doesn't care. And you just don't want to bring it up anymore after a while. And next thing you know, she's got all her pictures of her exes in her timeline or in her, in her social media, in her Instagram, if you scroll down far enough and it's there. Well, what's the standard now? Well, the standard is we can have pictures. It's fine to have pictures of our exes on social media. That's a fine thing to do. And it doesn't violate the boundaries of your relationship. So now you either need to change your boundary, which is change whose frame are you in at that point, right? And so that's what oftentimes happens because that guy sat there for 20 minutes talking about the dangers and the pitfalls and how disrespectful he thinks it is and trying to be heard and understood instead of just holding frame and getting compliance and getting an agreement to take the action, right? Without force. So frame with different people may be different, but in your relationships with women, that's how it is. All right. She can't take an action out of compliance and desire to be with you, find an understanding, and then be in agreement later if she does it through force most of the time. Now, sometimes, though, it can turn out that way. Like we look at extreme circumstances where you have Stockholm syndrome, right? Or abusive relationships where she does comply out of fear. And then she ends up defending her decision and then ends up defending the frame. And she's in the frame of the abuser at that point. And that can happen. Sure, no doubt. But it's still the most unstable way of trying. Even if it works, it's the most unstable way of holding frame because it's based on coercion and intimidation. And so that can easily fall apart because once, if the fear is removed, then the compliance and the whole framework falls down. So now you have to keep a relationship that is fear-based, which is generally abusive. And so she's going to come to light that you're an abusive partner then at that point. And even if you're not physically abusive, you can be seen as being mentally and emotionally abusive. All right. And that's what you'll end up with. And I've seen that time and time again. Guys following YouTuber advice on how to keep frame with a chick. And really, they're just being, unbending and a-hole and dominant and alpha and not having communication with a woman in a way that's effective. And she complies for a while, doesn't really agree, does it out of fear of losing the guy until her anxiety blows the thing up. He has to get more and more coercive and aggressive with his stance in order to try to keep her in pocket or keep her in line. And eventually she out. All right. Pimps lose their hose all the time. All right. Why? They lose their hose because the hoe gets out of the abusive relationship. And I'm using the pimp hoe example, but that's really a case where a pimp is using violence and intimidation, but he loses his girls all the time. All right. So you got these guys literally who real world do pimping. If they're not getting the girl like doing outwardly abusive things like smacking her around, getting her addicted to drugs, for example, all kinds of stuff to really coerce her and to really get her to comply, like it's just not going to work. And of course, that's not you guys watching my stuff. You shouldn't be anyway, right? So if you want a healthy, good relationship with a chick, some of the advice that's out there on Frame, it's way off base and y'all don't know what you're doing. All right. So let's tell you how to do it right. Okay. Now now you understand the Frame thing a little bit and how it shows up a little bit more. If you didn't understand that already, let's look at examples from Monday's show. All right. It's a very popular show that I did with Tori. Now I bring this up because we both like each other, respect each other, and we have a good time when we're on air. So there's that part of it. All right. So it's not I'm not in this divisive thing with her, right? Like we get along great and all that. All right. And so we're both in supportive and respect of each other. All right. Now we're platonic, of course. I have the LTR and all that, and we're a platonic relationship over YouTube. But you guys are in regular relationships. Your partner should, even dating relationships, or just seeing somebody, a plate or whatever, right? You guys should have at least respect from your partner, and she should at least care about you. Otherwise, we're in a situation that's worse than what this video is covering right now. Okay. But so I bring this video up though, because you can look back in parts of it. If you go back, I don't know, it's like sort of past the hour mark. I'm not sure what timestamp, but there's a point in the video where she disagrees. Okay. With something I say. And she goes, "Oh, I disagree." Now, some of you guys would, find that disrespectful immediately. Like, how dare you disagree with me? She must not be in the frame because she disagreed. No, that's not true. Just because a girl shit tests you or disagrees with the narrative, that doesn't mean she's not in it. So you're going to get disagreements in your relationships and your close relationships all the time. That doesn't mean you don't have frame. That's good. You actually want disagreements. Now, I'm not saying you want her to disagree with you all the time, but if she in her head isn't quite on the narrative or isn't quite in belief of what you're saying, and I'm not really pushing a programming or a narrative with Torsha because we're not in a relationship. It's just a discussion. But if she's not in agreement, if she's confused or concerned, or she doesn't really want to comply to something, you want her to bring a disagreement up. You don't want her to, out of respect, agree with you. Okay. Sometimes it's just compliance and all that. And I get that. But if she really has something where you want her to seek that understanding. All right. That's where you want to be. And so with that, she says, "I disagree." It was some guy asked a question, and the question was about his girl wanting to be more dominant in the bedroom, saying that she preferred to be more dominant. And so Tori took that differently than I did, that comment. Now, there's a lot of missing pieces. Now, in consult, when I see that, usually that means a certain conclusion, which is that she's experienced something before, it's worked before, and so she's letting him know what her preferences are. Pretty simple. That's normally what it is. But I'm glad that she brought up her point of view because that's not the only option. Now, I'm dealing with YouTube here and I'm dealing with generalities and not your individual circumstance. So when I get into communicating with women and what men and women do differently, I'm talking on a universal level and I'm talking on an instinctual level, right? Which tends to be universal. There are individual styles and preferences that will apply to your situation. So, like in the frame and seduction mastermind program, which link in the description for you to interview to see if you want to be a part of that. Those guys that are working with me for a year, for a full year, one on one, we're getting into individual motivations, individual preferences, how to recognize that. We're taking it beyond the general statements you can make on YouTube. All right. So understand, I expect anyone watching me that you would understand that, of course, I don't mean all women or all men or in every circumstance, because there are nuances to each individual circumstance. All right. Now, but in generality, with a general comment in super chat. All right. And by the way, send supers if you like. Would rather have you donate to my interpreter, though, to get him out of Afghanistan. So if you want to save your super chat money and click that donation button after the video, I would prefer that. But that being said, yeah. So there are individual differences and preferences, but we're going to talk about generalities here and in any sense in general too. When someone says, a woman says to a guy, well, I prefer to be on top. Like that's a good example. I prefer to be on top. That's because she thinks that she's going to get off by being on top. The reason she thinks that is because usually before, with previous experiences, she couldn't get off as well or at all in other places and positions, but she could get off with her on top. So she expresses that preference. Now, as the leader of that sexual encounter, you can take her into different places and she may find that she gets off better in different ways with you. That's the whole idea about being sexually dominant and leading the sexual encounter. All right. But it's good to know her preferences. And at any rate, so she disagreed because from her personal experience, she had experienced something different. Okay, now I could have cut her off. I could have pulled a, whatever and chose not to, listen to her. I could have done a lot of different things, could have felt threatened. That's what a lot of you guys do in your relationships with women when they say that they disagree. And even if you say, even if you go to hear them out, you do it from a place of defensiveness. So you go, well, I'm going to defend my position here, you see, and then you're not really listening. And so what I did was something different, which was in fact holding frame with a woman and how you do it. And that's why I want you guys to watch it. I stop and I go, I kind of laugh about it because it's kind of funny that the disagreement there, and then I say, okay, well, explain, what's your point of view? I want to hear it. And I genuinely listen to her point of view because I'm not arrogant enough to think, first of all, that I know everything. And so I'm going to look for the value in what she's talking about. We're in a conversation. She's honoring me with a conversation. I'm honoring her with a conversation. So out of respect for the other person, I'm going to want to hear what she has to say. So that's step number one, is you're going to listen to a chick. All right. You're a chick. Step number two is you're going to seek understanding. So as I'm listening, I'm not just listening to the words that come out of her mouth so that I can defeat her argument. Right. Because that's what a lot of you guys do. Oh, my frame is this, and I can't budge from my frame, my preconceived notions, or else I'm beta and not alpha. So I have to listen. I have to look, hear what she's saying to look for ways to defend my position and to attack her argument and to win logically. That's what most of you guys do. And that's, one way of looking at it, but that's not the right way. What you want to do is you want to understand from her perspective, empathetically, what she means and what she's talking about. That's the first step. Because if you don't know what her perspective is, her motivations, what she's actually saying and why she is thinking that in the first place, you can't really lead in a sense. All right. Now, from there, you'll hear me in the discussion, and there's a lot of, she's a bit ADHD, and I can be that way too. So there's a bit of interrupting here. Now, I'm not offended or worried about the interruptions because I know that she's not doing it out of disrespect. And she frequently apologizes for doing that because she doesn't mean to be disrespectful. But I understand that is the way that she communicates. I accept that. I'm not forcing her to make that differently for me. All right. And that's another thing. Some things you guys may want somebody to work on, but you have to, let's say you're in a relationship with someone and they do something that you really don't want. You have to have patience to give her an opportunity to work on that. That's number one. And number two, you have to know what to accept and what you should accept as a way somebody just sort of handles certain things, or how their brain works or how their mind works, instead of trying to change them. You guys spend too much time trying to explain yourselves, defend your position, and change the girls you're with in terms of changing the way that they think and operate and how they are as a person. Not talking about changing behaviors and having boundaries. It's different. And so you're wasting your time and energy changing the wrong damn thing. Okay. And so now I'm listening and I'm understanding her point of view. Now with that, I'm making this goes back and forth for a little bit because she's not understanding me. And so I keep going back to step 3, which is clarity. Okay. Clarity is where I'm making sure that I understand her point of view. Now, sometimes I might not need to say anything. It's pretty clear. Sometimes it's useful for me to repeat back from my words what she's saying so that I get agreement and know that that I understand what she's saying. And I did that for you guys too, so you guys can understand what her point of view was. All right. I'm not trying to defeat her in an argument. I'm trying to get clarity and understand her. That's different. All right. Seeking understanding and getting clarity of the point of view is not losing the narrative. It's not losing frame. It's in fact critical and crucial for keeping frame, because again, frame involves her emotional buy-in to want to follow you, knowing her needs are going to be met, or wanting to follow the narrative because you're the dominant personality. It's not about, whether or not it came from you or whether or not you convinced her or whatever, or whether or not she even agreed or not. Right. And so you'll see me go back and forth because I'm repeating back. She goes, no, that's not okay. Well, what is it then? And I keep asking questions. I don't stop asking until we get on a page where I know that I understand what she's saying. And she knows that I understand that she is saying, okay. And this is really important with women. They need to feel like they are understood. And that goes to instinctual things. Guys need it too, but only to a degree. And I'll get to that reasoning in a minute. All right. So I seek clarity. Now, part of seeking clarity too is if I see a flaw right away, I'll ask something that challenges the paradigm. I'm not telling her she's wrong or defending my point of view. I'm asking a question that might get her to try to think of things differently. Okay. And so, for example, this is outside of Monday's show, but let's say, back to let's say she was angry and criticized or whatever and was like, you're always, selfish. And you go, well, tell me more about what you mean by that. Because that sounds like an attack. What do you mean? And then you're listening and trying to understand her. And then she's listing all the times you've been selfish. And then you say, okay, was I selfish last week though, when we did this thing and I planned this entire evening for us and I'd been, thinking of your needs, my needs. And I mean, did you see that as selfish? Well, I mean, you did what you wanted to do. Well, sure. But do you think I didn't consider though you at all? And she's like, well, no, I mean, you did consider me there. I see what you're saying. You see what I mean? And so that's how that conversation should go. Instead of saying, oh, so you say I'm selfish, but F you, I'm not selfish. That's not how it works, right? By seeking clarity, I'm asking questions that challenge the paradigm if I see something that already doesn't quite fit. And then that opens her mind up. Okay, maybe this narrative that I'm following needs to change. And now she knows she's been listened to, she's been understood. She knows you, likes you, trusts you, is attracted to you, desires you in a relationship. Okay. And then when you seek clarity, she feels that even stronger. And if by seeking that clarity, her paradigm's challenged a bit, that makes her now open to understanding you and taking on a different narrative. And it's from that point you do what's called action. Now, the action is maybe you don't do anything. Sometimes you just get the clarity and she, gets the understanding and it's fine. So, an example of Monday's show, when I was seeking clarity, she goes, "Oh, I see what you're saying. So you're saying," then she paraphrased back to me because she wanted to know that she was understood. And I said, "Yes." And she goes, "Oh, I see what you mean. Okay. Yeah, no, that could be." And so then I proceeded then with my points. I didn't have to address it anymore. There's no real action to be taken other than to continue the show. Even at some point, she goes, "Okay, well, maybe I was wrong," or whatever. I think she said something like that, which is fine. And it's not about her being wrong. Her point was actually valid, and it brought up good ideas because it brought up the fact that I needed some time to mention sometimes, which is that this is YouTube and I'm making a generalized statement based on a generalized comment. There are different nuances and different possibilities based on individual circumstances. And we always have to remember that. And her possibility of what could have been going on is a possibility. Without more information, it would be hard to say. Gave a probable answer, what I think is the most probable answer. But of course, with more information, maybe that answer isn't necessarily it, which is why you have to book a consult to get really dialed into your thing, or jump into like the mastermind program, work with me one-on-one if you want to get dialed into something specific. Okay. But for general understanding, it was good points. But anyways, you can see through that. All right. That what that communication thing was. And that was holding the frame the entire time. Had I been just arguing with her and confronting her and getting uncomfortable about the fact that she's challenging me and all these things, I wouldn't have frame. When you lose emotional stability as a man, you start to lose your leadership, and that's how you lose your frame, because then she'll use that to pull you into her narrative, right? And then the narrative isn't by your choice, it ends up being by hers. Okay? So this works because, and I'll get to some final things for more practical stuff. Hit the like button though, right? If you like what we're talking about, find this useful. All right, I appreciate it. Say something in the chat, maybe throw a number 1 in the chat or something like that. Go donate to my friend who I'm trying to get out of Afghanistan, all that stuff. All right. Let's continue for a little bit, and then I'll check back for questions, and then we'll close off. But so let's look at back to now just male female differences. So our brains are different. A way of understanding it is the male filter works like this. It goes instinct, unconscious, reason first, and then emotion. Whereas the female filter works at instinct, unconscious, emotion next, and then reason. So it's flipped. Now, does that mean women can never be reasonable or logical? No, of course they can be. All right. Some women are more reasonable than others. Some women are less emotional than others. But it does mean that it's going to go through her emotional filters first. Okay. So that's what it is. Now, you as a man, you tend to approach a problem where you want to have this logical discussion to solve a problem, right? You want to talk about things in a logical way or in your formatted way of talking about it, usually to get some sort of solution or outcome, or even if that solution is just understanding it, right? You also, as a man, may find yourself wanting to take responsibility for her happiness. This happens because of your instinctual drive to want to protect the baby maker. All right. So when you see a woman that you're with and, banging or want to bang as a potential baby maker for you, there's a instinct that creeps in where you want to protect her, and make sure she's good. Right. And that can lead into you wanting to take responsibility for her happiness. And sometimes, depending on your social conditioning, right, that can turn into wanting to seek approval from her in order to make her happy. So you're having this conversation from the standpoint of wanting to explain, okay, and really get your point across. You're wanting to really be heard by her so that you know that she understands and approves of your message. And then, of course, the compliance is there. That is a lot of the guys, most guys, particularly guys who don't watch my channel and who haven't looked into these topics or issues, the regular, we'll call it blue pilled world out there. That's what most guys do. All right. Now she doesn't want, she's not looking for that. She wants to talk to see how she feels about it. All right. She wants to have a conversation with you back and forth so she can see what her feelings are about the topic and to see how you feel about the topic, and then get some sort of agreement and acceptance. And she wants to be accepted and understood for her point of view, even if you don't agree with it, and even if you don't go with her idea. All right. So oftentimes, in fact, in discussions or just conversations with women, there is no real conclusion or logical outcome or action plan. It's just to talk and to feel better about talking about it. All right. Women, generally speaking, like to get their ideas out, hear how it sounds, feel how they're going to feel about it, and then sort through things logically from there. And this is, again, general stuff. Okay. Doesn't mean they're not logical. All right. So what this does is this leads to a situation where you two are not even communicating on the same level. A man, he's trying to explain himself because he has a point of view and logic and reasoning behind it. And he wants to be understood so that she can agree with him, tell him how alpha he is and how smart he is for his wonderful ideas. And then, of course, they follow through and he leads the relationship. The more beta guys, or guys who've been socially conditioned this way or whatever, they want all of that. Plus, they want her permission and her approval on top of it. So in that communication, what you'll find is a guy will spend a lot of time explaining and convincing and presenting things in a certain way to try to get his girl to agree and accept and approve of his message. And then what happens, though, is that's not what the woman really wants. She wants to be heard and understood. So when she's not complying with that, and she's not feeling like she can talk about her ideas, and she's not feeling like she can explore those ideas and how she feels about them, and get reactions to see how you feel about her ideas, to get that social approval, acceptance or not, then she starts to shut down, shut off. She'll let you talk and check out, and then have her own ideas and not care about your ideas because you're just whatever. That's just what he thinks. You see what I mean? That's not frame at all. And it's not really effective communication. But she may do different things. She may shit test you too, right? All right. She may challenge the idea because really she wants to be heard and she wants to feel like she's being listened to. So she's going to challenge it so that she gets to get her point of view out. And a lot of times her point of view isn't even in disagreement with yours when you start talking about it, but she just wanted to be heard. Right? She may have sounded like in disagreement because she hadn't heard herself say what was in her own head yet. All right. Now, look, on an instinctual level, being the physically weaker sex who relied on men for resources, this is in tribal times now, of course, it's not logistically true now, but the monkey brain, all right, still operates like this. On an instinctual level, being heard and having her point of view and emotions understood is seen critical to her survival. All right. And so critical to her survival is being understood, because if she feels like you don't understand and you don't understand her emotions, and then you can't possibly, even in your best laid efforts, have her best interest in mind when moving forward. And that's a threat. That makes her not feel so good. And what'll happen is she's going to challenge your communication and your authority, all right? And as a man, and challenge your frame. And if you're sitting there trying to explain and get her approval, then she's going to, and she's challenging you all the time. Now you have a conflict. And so most guys end up with this doing this explanation stuff. She ends up interrupting him because she wants to be heard, challenging him, or she just gets frustrated, or she shuts down. He can get butthurt at the challenge, right? She does anything but shut down a lot of times. He's just butthurt, right? He's mad about it because she thinks he's not being respected, and she's not in my frame. What do I do? Do I get more aggressive? And so she's not, if she's unhappy or not in agreement for some reason, or she's just seeking understanding or wanting to have her emotions heard, oftentimes guys can see it as an attack on his ego. Oh, I'm a bad boyfriend because she doesn't agree or think I'm amazing and smart and alpha for my idea, or she's unhappy right now and I'm responsible for her happiness. And so that makes me a bad boyfriend. So I'm either going to apologize and placate and try to make things better and all these unattractive things rather than leading, or I'm going to get angry, upset, butthurt, and we're going to get into a fight. And if she thinks it's going to be like that, a lot of times just clam up. They just let it go and they bury it down and they go on. And then you think, oh, see, cool, just a second here. That is not true, and that's not Donovan Sharp. All right. Donovan has a lot of speakers for the CME. He's not asked me. All right. And I can't say that I would say yes or no to it because I'd have to look at the dates. I mean, until he asks me, I don't know. All right. So no, he has not asked me to speak at the CME. Send him a message and tell him to ask me, and then maybe him and I can have a dialogue. Right. I like some of the stuff he does, and I like how he's bringing people together. So I don't have a bad thing to say about him, right? But just, hey, he hasn't asked me. So, and he can't ask everybody. There's all kinds of people. So there it is. Anyway, just don't listen to those fake accounts, guys. Come on now. Excuse me. So that's the trap, though, you don't want to get into. Okay, you don't want to get into interrupting her, emoting, getting mad, telling her, commanding her because you're so alpha, or pleading for her understanding because you want, her to accept you and she's your mommy now. All right. And then you don't want her to be in a place where she's getting annoyed, unattracted, and frustrated. All right. So what do we do? Okay. Well, again, I already gave the formula, but I'll give it again. So instead of deering, okay, if you don't know what that is, right? That's defending yourself, explaining, excusing, or rationalizing, which is what men tend to do in an argument. You have to Luca. Okay, my new one, Luca. We'll call it Luca. Came up with an acronym just now. Okay, listen, understand, seek that understanding, clarity. All right, get clarity. Make sure that she knows you understand and that you know you understand, and also challenge any paradigms during the clarity step through questions, and then action. Now, that action is not where you defend and explain and rationalize and excuse your behavior, okay? The action is you come up with what's happening next, go forward, usually. And now that could be a statement. A statement's different than an explanation. A statement is where you say, hey, I've heard what you're saying. Here's what way it is. Basically, from my perspective, what I think, here's how it is. Here's what we're going to do about it. All right. So it's not trying to seek her approval or acceptance for your explanation. You're not trying to get her to understand you. You're just telling her, hey, here's what we're doing. If she has questions, it's like, okay, here's why we're doing it, because you have those questions. And her choices are to follow or not follow, more or less, or continue a discussion if she has other points to bring up, and it is an exchange, but you are ultimately the decider of that action when you have the frame. Okay. Sometimes put it on the shelf. If it's not an immediate concern, putting it on the shelf and, decide that you're going to think about the best action to take. And that's okay too. Sometimes you just tell her no and she doesn't like it, but she complies because she still is in the narrative, even when she doesn't like it. Right. Sometimes she brings up a great point and great stuff, and you realize, okay, you know what? I have to change what my original ideas were. The narrative changes, but it changes on your terms, though. You see, you're not changing it because you have to placate to her to keep the relationship together or any of that stuff, right? You're not changing it because you're being coerced. You're changing it because really it's the better choice. And the stupid thing that I see a lot of guys do is sometimes a girl brings up something and she's correct and you are wrong. And the guy insists on continuing to be wrong because he thinks that's alpha. That's not alpha. That's just stupid. All right. In absence of new information and a better idea, you go with the better idea. Or I say in absence. When presented with new information, you go with the better idea. And if she's the one to present that information, give her credit for it. Say, I'm happy you brought this up. That's really good that you said that. I appreciate what you're saying. We're going to do this. Why not respect your partner? Right? It's good. She's supposed to be a compliment to your life. Part of being a compliment is bringing up things and ideas that maybe you don't see. This is why you pick someone who's actually got a brain in her head, not just a pair of tits and a nice ass. All right. So that concludes our presentation for today. All right. That acronym lives on the second floor. I don't know. I'll even write it down here. Luca. Oh, shoot. I have to actually. So this is not an imposter. So listen, understand. This will get you out of a lot of trouble, guys. Clarity and action. There you go. That's what you do instead of deering. All right. You heard it here first because that's the first time I've ever done that. I don't know if this is the real Torsha or not. What if she has a flat one? Well, I guess you have to just keep banging her until she grows something. So, and then put her on a squat program. maybe it looks good naked. Who knows? So anyway, yeah, yep. So that's it, guys. I'll look backwards and get some questions. I feel like this is the real Torsha. I don't know. Maybe it's on the list. It's not on I got my mastermind program that I'm putting a ton of effort in, and we are going to have a meetup. So with that mastermind program, there's so much more than just this YouTube video. These guys are getting into a place where they're going to apply it to their individual situations, whether it's getting girls or dating, whether it's keeping the girl they're with and having better relationship, or whether it's getting over a breakup and moving into having better things with women in the future. Because it's a year long, guys are going through the entire process and they're getting all of the tools. You will have full competency and ability with seduction and frame by the end of that year. And you'll get a lot right in the beginning. There's a lot of things we're covering right now and the initial communication stuff, but we're getting into all kinds of things. We've already talked about sex and how to hold that frame and seduce in the bedroom to create peak experiences. We'll talk about sexual difficulties. We'll call it difficulties like women having trouble with orgasming, for example, and how to handle that, how to handle your own stamina and sexual power, technique, how to basically make the sexual experience a full experience using psychology and human sexual dynamics and social interaction, as well as the physical components of sex. Sex is mostly The physical part of it is only part of it, right? And we're going to be talking about that. We'll be talking about handling arguments, handling problems. I mean, all kinds of stuff, and it's a year long. So that's what it is. All right. There's a link in the description if you want to be a part of that. Instead of just sitting on the sidelines, although I appreciate your support, but instead of sitting on the sidelines, watching stuff and not necessarily improving, okay, you can actually get one-on-one work with me and help too from a group of guys who are doing the same thing. They're all at different levels. I got some guys who are straight up experts in my mastermind group, and I have some guys that are beginning. It's just you've got to be a good fit for it, and that's where you'll interview with Weston, and he'll make sure that, and then go over pricing options and go over your goals. Because if I'm not going to be able to meet your goals, or if there's other things that you really need to be doing, I'd rather have you go do that than be not getting the results you need in my program. But don't think though that you're not a good fit and self-talk yourself out of it. Just make the appointment. All right, you'd be surprised. All right. So that's it, guys. Thanks again for listening. Thanks again for the support. I think that this was a good one. And I think that is important for you guys to hear. And I don't think that there is much else out there in the game right now that explains things to this level. I'm going to give myself that credit right now. All right. So you guys take care. Have a good day. Catch you on the next one.